And I will call the July 13th, 2020 school board meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
And Anita is not here this evening. Stacy, if you would be able to do the roll call, please. I will call the July 13th, 2020 school board meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay.
All right.
Deja vu.
Barb Wettstein.
Here.
Ryan Wopat.
Here.
Trenton David Koosman.
Excused.
Gary Dunlap.
Here.
Cheryl Hancock.
Here.
Nita Jagosinski.
Excused.
Chris Law.
Here.
Rebecca Reber.
Here.
Okay, so with 6 of the 7 school board members present, I would declare a quorum. Approval of the agenda. I would note that the agenda has been posted, distributed, and sent to the local media. With this in mind, are there any changes?
On number 7.7, could we just strike MOU and change that to resolution, please, for this evening?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other changes? So then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Public participation. I don't have any cards and don't see anyone. Okay, we'll move on to reports and discussion, and we will move to the Boys and Girls Club lease agreement, and it will be on the consent on the 27th.
Yeah, so I'm very excited this evening to bring forward the Boys and Girls Club lease agreement. This journey actually began in December of 2017 when we started looking at our un- and underfunded needs and the needs of our students out at the Academy on the Prairie. Since then, we were fortunate in July of 2019 that Dave and Barb Scogan announced that they were going to gift the vacant festival food store on Holmen Drive to become a Boys and Girls Club in the Holmen area. With this, we are looking to move the Academy on the Prairie programs to the Boys and Girls Club. And in that, they have been called the Academy on the Prairie programs, and that they are no longer going to be located there. Some staff have recommended it to be called the ACE Academy, which stands for Academic and Community Engagement Academy. That academy would include the programs that were included out at the Academy on the Prairie, which were Risk to Resilience, Project Bridge, and Community Connections. So the School District of Holmen recommends entering into a lease agreement with the Boys and Girls Club Scogan Club. This lease will allow the district to relocate the Academy on the Prairie programs to the designated district space in the club, which provides a much closer location to Holmen High School and the Holmen community. If approved, the lease would commence August 1st of 2020 and be reviewed after 10 years. Per the lease, the district would pay $9.50 per square foot of rented space each month, which comes out to about approximately $3,404 per month. And the rent would be adjusted every January 1st. The district must also pay approximately $583 per month for a proportionate share of the facility maintenance, utilities, as well, and insurance. With that, though, there's also an operations manual being developed, which does link to this lease agreement and some other uses that we're going to have of the facility. So Vicki Lyons, who is our community liaison that's working with other programming that we'll be talking about and bringing to the board in the near future, is going to present some of those pieces in that operational manual for you this evening. So I'm going to invite her up here to present that to you and then see if there's questions.
Good evening.
Good evening, Vicki.
Thank you for having me this evening. I want to share with you the work that's being done by the administrative staff here at the Holmen School District regarding the operations of the Boys and Girls Club. The people who have been involved in this have been Jill Mason, Matt Myers, Nick Bakke, Dr. Mueller, and from the Boys and Girls Club, Andy Keel, who is the Director of Operations for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater La Crosse, as well as Tegan Hay, and she's the Director of Program Development. We've been working the last number of months to put into place the kinds of policies and procedures that will make the partnership work very well. And I think that we've got a really good start and a really good document to work from. One of the things that we needed to address was how are people going to get into the facility? And we wanted to be sure that the area in yellow, that is the school district, that's the ACE Academy, they have their own entrance on the south side of the building. The main entrance, whereas the BGC, is also the entrance for the Holmen Area Community Center folks. The green area is the area that's common that the Holmen Area Community folks will use to go into the gymnasium in the light purple when they're using that space. The blue area is all of the Boys and Girls Club, and the orange is the Holmen Area Community Center. And I show you this map to give you an idea of not only the space that the school district has, but also within the blue area, the number of spaces that are shared. And I'll talk about those specifically, but the area that you're able to utilize allows students to leave from kind of the middle part of that yellow going into the blue down the hallway, so they're able to use the shared spaces and come back. So ACE Academy has that availability during the school day, which is very nice. And also, as the Holmen Area Community Center develops its intergenerational mentorship programs, there is a way for those folks to be able to interact with students as well easily without having to go all the way through the Boys and Girls Club. So it's been designed very, very well for that purpose. So the ACE Academy has its classrooms, its teaching department, its offices, but it also has access to a gymnasium, the cafeteria, the music room and the recording studio, as well as the dance studio, as I said, during the school day. Those spaces will be scheduled quarterly so that the teachers and students know they have that availability. One of the things that the group did was to define every space in terms of how it will be secure and supervised, what kinds of programming will happen in that space, as well as how that space will be used. Every room in the facility. As we know, building partnerships requires building trust. And one of the things that we can really do that we've tried to do with this is build that trust through open conversation and attention to detail on how the building will be used. That makes everything run very smoothly. In managing those shared spaces, the Boys and Girls Club administration will maintain an official calendar so that everybody knows what's happening. Any users that go into those shared spaces will be responsible for setup and for cleanup of each space. So for example, when the students and faculty would like to use the cafeteria, they'll be able to go in and use the entire cafeteria for lunch. If they choose to use the music room or the recording studio, same thing. It would be go in, use the space, be good stewards, clean it up, and walk out again. So the school district personnel space usage, so any other personnel that might request to use the Boys and Girls Club will go through internal processes through the school district. So if it's during the school day or after hours, Dr. Mueller and her team will have a process for people to go through and request. So those requests come through that rather than multiple people making that request directly to the Boys and Girls Club. There are general policies that have been developed for the facility. These are around what people should wear, everything from what kind of shorts you should have on to making sure you have the right shoes in the gymnasium. And that's important, and it's important from a Boys and Girls Club perspective because their work with students and with others is based upon a strong sense of how to build character, as well as how to build what you do in your space and how to be in that space. There are policies around alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs that follow the kinds of policies that the school district uses. behavior and discipline, such as when a student is, a little challenged and may not be following the right procedures in the either space, the Boys and Girls Club or the school district. How do we do that? And we do that and handle that by communication between the ACE Academy faculty and the area director at the Boys and Girls Club. So we'll have strong communication with any of those kinds of things that may happen. Firearms, weapons, explosives, obviously they don't belong, as well as where food and beverage can be. So when you receive the final manual, you'll see specifically how those things fall out. And the last piece I'd like to visit with you about is the operational procedures. These are the specific things that happen on a day-to-day basis so that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. And if an adult asks a student either in the BGC or a student in the academy, what are you doing? Everyone will know what the other group is doing. So there are rules around access control, who has keys to the facility, who shall use them, and how they shall be used, how the equipment in the shared spaces will be used, as well as around maintenance. As Dr. Mueller talked about in the lease, there's maintenance types of activities that happen. How is that going to actually happen? The security cameras that are in place, who can view what happens in the academy? And we know that we want to keep student privacy at the forefront. And so in this particular case, the policy reads that no one other than school district and police department personnel, based on your current policies and procedures, will view that security camera footage. Scheduling of all of these rooms and priorities and et cetera, that's all laid out in the manual, as well as a complete emergency response plan. What happens when something goes wrong? And it follows the policies and procedures that you have for your response plan, including Alice, as well as communicating with the police department, the fire department, the two major hospitals in the area, as well as other support organizations. So the operations manual is that foundation that builds a good partnership, and the staff has done an excellent job in getting that completed. Questions?
Any questions? So the operations plan, does it follow the Boys and Girls Club plan, or are we having a separate plan? I guess that's what I was taking from what you're saying.
It's a joint plan. We've written it together. And the community center folks have had the plan as well, and they're reviewing it from the perspective of what they need to add in.
Okay, thank you.
And one last thing I need to mention is the lease that is in your packet this evening, it says draft across it. We are working on just one last tweak in agreement in the lease to make sure that both parties have, I could say, a very cordial agreement between our insurance and how that works and so on if something were to happen. So we're just getting that worked out. So it'll be in complete form, definitely for your review before you approve it the next meeting. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
As she indicated, this will be on the consent at the next meeting. So the next item is school meal prices. Mr. Gasper.
Do you want your thing up?
She
Are you
is
good?
cleaning, or you could do it from your space and use the
Okay.
microphone.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight. We do this every year. We usually do it in May, but because of the current pandemic, we asked for a little bit of an extension. But as you know, we've worked very hard in the school district to develop a fund balance for the food service department, which currently stands at $713,172 and a little bit of change. We are going to recommend, we last raised prices in the 2017-2018 school year, and we really feel, based on the pandemic and the economic status of people, that it's perhaps time to use some of that fund balance and keep our lunch prices again at that 2017-2018 level. We think that will help the community, certainly will help, hopefully, our participation in the program, and we're pretty confident, even though we will use some of that fund balance, that we'll be able to make that up in years to come. So That's the recommendation, to not raise prices for the third year in a row. And by the way, that will keep us at the lowest rate in the Cooley region for breakfast and lunch.
And isn't there a rate we have to be at by the Fed?
There is,
With that?
and again, they've created the exception. If you have a fund balance as of January 1st of the year, you don't have to raise your prices. You can utilize your fund balance. And that's how we've avoided raising the prices the last 2 years, and that's how we'll do it again this year.
Any other questions?
How many free meals did you guys put together this year?
For the emergency meals, 127,003, I believe.
Awesome. Thanks for
That
that.
is awesome, yes.
The girls, the staff did a fabulous job. I shouldn't say girls because there was some guys there too, but did a great job.
Thank you, Mike. And I know this is on the next board meeting agenda, so if you have any other if you have any questions. But thank you so much for your leadership in this area. Really
Thank
much
you.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then graduation plans, Mr. Sackett and Dr. Mueller.
Oh, we'll let Mr. Sackett go.
Good evening, everyone. I have a half smile, half saddened look behind this mask on my face tonight. I'm sure you've read the report regarding the class of 2020 graduation plans, and it's no secret. Our students, our staff, our families have lost out on so many things, and graduation is one of the most joyous events that we have at the high school level. And so it's saddening, it's heartbreaking that, you know, we've had to really take a look at where we're at in La Crosse County and the Compass and cancel our traditional in-person ceremony. And that hasn't come out, you know, hasn't been taken lightly. We've held out hope for, 2 months now, you know, when we first canceled graduation, and met with parents, met with families, met with students, taken feedback, and trying to hold out hope and devise multiple plans to have that. And we, the senior committee, the senior advisors, myself, met on multiple occasions, devising multiple plans, including the kind of one we're at this point. I've also collaborated with our principals across La Crosse County high schools and had multiple discussions with them, and we've all kind of come to the same conclusion that we just can't have this traditional in-person ceremony. So we've moved to virtual ceremony along with sort of a parade format. And we have been working closely with the county health department, and we are going to be able to have a stage area so graduates can walk across the stage and have that experience and get their diploma and have a photograph of that situation that they traditionally have. So depending how much detail you want, I can talk about kind of the setup, our stations, and specific format, but that's kind of the general idea of where we're at, and we're consistent across the county. Questions?
Questions?
I do have one.
Yes,
It
Brad.
talks about the virtual video production. Is that like a CD that you're going to give the students?
Actually, we'll share it out. We've made sure we've talked with all our parents and families, you know, because there have been some families that don't like a release of information. We've got permission from those families, much like we do for homecoming. We've done this homecoming video now, and they all love to be part of that. And so we've got permission to do this virtual video and send it out via a link. And so we got our IT folks working on that even as we speak. I think all the speeches have been recorded. We've got music taken care of. We've got the traditional baby picture, senior picture portion. So we've got a lot that we're finalizing yet, and hopefully we have that finalized and rendered by this Friday, and we'll share that out. We've kind of talked maybe Friday of next week before our graduation ceremony on July 25th.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so very much. I know this was not an easy task to get together, and we appreciate the work. I'm really glad that you collaborated with the other schools in the county. I think if one district did something and another one didn't, it would not be as pleasant. So, I mean, it's not the best situation anyway, but I think that really helps. So, Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.
So you'll have to decide if you're going to join us for that graduation ceremony, because the idea is they drive up in front of the high school and we'll have some chairs outside, because it's going to be just a beautiful day and that way you can at least wave, say hi, or whatever you'd like to those graduates that come across. So Stacy will be sending out to see interest in that attendance or not, but everyone is invited as
Great,
board
thank
members,
you.
so thanks.
So the next item is the resolution urging emergency stabilization funding. Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, so as we are all aware, the fiscal state of not only our nation, but our state and our education is dwindling, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're going to use that this evening. So in an effort to present a unified voice from you, the Board of Education of the School District of Holmen, I would like the board to consider a resolution that is relevant to our district and the students and children and families that we serve. The resolution would be sent to our legislative representatives in WASB, WASDA, the local media, and other outlets, our governor of Wisconsin, and area school boards. It would provide talking points for you also as board members in your advocacy for our students and families in the School District of Holmen. The resolution supports emergency stabilization funding due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what it would do is it would urge President Trump and members of Congress to immediately allocate significant and sufficient emergency stabilization aid, enabling our state governments across America to fund their public schools, including Holmen School District. And also, for Governor Tony Evers and our Wisconsin State Legislature to allocate sufficient funding from both the 2021-22 state budget and the state's Budget Stabilization Fund, also known as, you've maybe heard the Rainy Day Fund in that, enabling school districts to fund their staff and programs and execute out their mission of educating our students. We are finding as we move further down this road in our planning, there's new expenses that are popping up every day. To be able to provide the environment we need to for our students that are safe, but also to support our staff and leave that they might need. It's not a cheap task, and so we are working on ways to do our best with that, but this resolution would also help them be aware of where we are at with things. So that's what this is for. So I ask that you will support and sign this, and we'll move forward with it.
And I think our staff did ask
Oh,
us
yes.
to consider this.
Yes, and definitely, don't want to forget that. Our staff, our Holmen Education Association definitely worked and shared and said they definitely would support this and wanted us to bring this forward too. So, yes,
Okay, thank you. And that is on the consent this evening.
yes.
So then, strategic plan.
Okay. All right. I come before you, sorry. There is a 2014 to 2019 strategic plan that the School District of Holmen currently has. While we are embarking on the year of 2020 and already in it, it is time to revisit and refresh our strategic plan. We have done some work around it where we had updated our focus areas a few years ago, but now we're taking a look at our vision, mission, and core values to complete our strategic plan moving forward for 2020 to 2025. So with that, just wanted to talk about our journey and how we got there. If you remember, we invited our community in January of 2020, and when they were here, we asked them things such as, what do you think graduates would think, feel, say, and do? And then we asked them to create a postcard of what they would envision our district to look like 5 years from now. And then we also said, what kind of values do you think we need to work most productively together? And we got a great amount of feedback from our community that day. And also we got feedback from you as board members. And then further, we did focus groups with the students different student groups at all age levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And we got some staff together and asked them some of the same questions. And it was very enlightening and actually, it really showed who we are, because the results really had some very common themes. Because you never know when you're getting information from so many different stakeholders what's going to come about. But what we found is there was some very common themes. And so then what we did is we created a draft. Our leadership team worked hard on looking at those common themes and making a visual out of this to determine what would be a good mission, vision, values moving forward. So with that, this is the one-page pager, I guess you could say, of a strategic plan that would be moving forward. The vision that was brought forward, that came out of it, is in the School District of Holmen, belong, serve, and succeed. So that would be our aspiration for our success, is we want everyone to belong, we want to serve, and we want to succeed. Then, our mission, which defines the purpose and what we do every day, is down in the bottom left corner. What we do every day and why we are here is preparing students for tomorrow through an engaging and inclusive educational community today. And then lastly, our core values, which is the key beliefs that guide who we are and our daily actions, would be empowerment, equity, excellence, integrity, and safety. And what that picture up above, we've had a motto for the last few years, Better Together. That has served us very well. That has really become who we are. We work consistently together on many things and do our best to work with all of our stakeholders, community partners, and so on, which is surrounded by our focus areas, which we had created before. But I think one of the very intertwining themes that came through this, which we're starting to see just through all the actions nationally, is about belonging in that equity piece and being inclusive, which we've taken steps that way, but you can see it was intertwined in everything that we heard from all of our groups. And I think that will be a very important piece moving forward as to what will be a district-wide equity plan that we would want to work on moving forward. So with that, I just wanted to bring it to you as a board, and any last comments or inputs before we would bring this to approval to share with our staff, especially on opening day.
Yeah, so this would come before us for approval at the next board meeting. Any comments or questions? So we met and we talked about this in our workshop, and I know I'm really glad to see the direction that it's going, because I feel it was driven this way before all of the events of recent months happened. And so it shows that even before that, we recognize that we have work to do. And, Dr. Mueller, since you came, you have brought to the district a lot of information about diversity and training, and you've brought speakers to the district, and, it's been a real positive thing. And then we go deeper, and I had a young student, a graduate from Holmen. She looked over that training and was really impressed. She is a person of color, and her one comment about it is that, was this led, though, in the years to follow, were people of color doing this training, or was it, a Caucasian staff person? And sometimes we have to dig deeper and think about that. So while we have done a good job, we've got to look deeper at that equity value, that core value, and that inclusiveness. And I applaud you for this direction. I'm really glad to see this, and I think we as a board, I suspect will support this. But I think we have to, once we do, we have to dig deeper, and it can't just be words on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It has to be some really tough choices sometimes for professional development and those kind of things, so.
Yeah, and one thing I'm very proud of is our administrative leadership team has really made a commitment just through their actions and all the work they have been doing, and they do know there's a lot of hard work ahead too. So it's nice to see their commitment to that, so.
Yeah, it will be interesting to hear some of the plans that we, embark on as a result of the adaptation of this too, so.
Yep.
And it ties in beautifully with the book you picked, or whoever picked it.
Oh, The Waking Up White.
Holy cow, is that a
Yes.
good book?
Yes, and we started our book study on our administrative team with that.
Nice.
And I look forward to working with the board on that at some point. There'll be a forum next year in La Crosse, which will kind of culminate, the book. So I will get you that if you don't have that yet, because I see you in public a lot right now, right?
Yes, yeah, you'll have to get us that book. I know you were talking about
Yeah.
that. We keep forgetting about that. But this is the first time we've been together, so.
Sorry, I came and picked it up, so
Oh.
that's the only reason. I forgot that I did it separately.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Good.
No, it's all good.
So again, that will be on the next week's or the next board meeting agenda. So then, the 2021 Restart Reopening Plan,
All right, so this is the big moment.
as of today.
Yes, exactly, and I'm glad you preface as of today. We learn new information on a daily basis, even from our county health department. We've learned so much in the last few days, which really changes on what your plan looks like when you're restarting a school year in the fall. It seems crazy to think March 13th of 2020 is when we had an order, and it was you have to shut your doors of school and go online. And we had to turn our switch within moments. The great part about now is we've had much time to do training with staff and prepare and really make sure we have a quality plan moving forward so our students get a good education, however they may need that to be. So tonight is a general overview of information on how we plan to restart. The plan is to share as much as we can of what we know. And then tomorrow, we will make sure we send all families in the district an email with this presentation and other, kind of the highlights that we think they're looking for, like such things as what's the schedule maybe going to be and how are they going to determine and so forth. So in talking about this plan, there's things that we made sure that we did to guide. This looks maybe a little familiar. Like, how do you decide how you are going to plan a reopening? We made sure we really had some guiding principles to help us in this complex decision-making process. So the main part that guided how we are going about this is what we heard from our stakeholders and community in our strategic planning sessions. So we really used this vision, mission, values as we started to move forward with our planning. Then also in our planning, things that we have to definitely take into account that are our guiding principles is around safety. We are committed to looking closely to our La Crosse County Health Department guidance, our Department of Health Services from the state, our Department of Public Instruction, our CDC, and just really looking at all the different guidelines and figuring out what fits us best in moving forward in Holmen. Then also, what's guiding us is the importance of not only our academics, but we know the social, emotional learning of our students and the mental health and well-being is very important. So we're taking that into consideration also. We're developing plans that support students in their return, including instructional models that could include virtual, distance, in-person, or hybrid learning. And you'll see that as we move forward. And lastly, another guiding principle around this is the flexibility. Instructional models may change throughout the year based on conditions around this pandemic. What we're finding is it changes from week to week, and we're preparing for a variety of different scenarios. The important piece I want to share is we are using the compass, the Cooley Compass in La Crosse County. That is updated every Wednesday, and we then take that and we put it into place the following Monday. So right now it's orange. If it were to turn red on Wednesday, we would say, okay, on Monday, it is what we would follow. But the La Crosse County has recently changed their K-12 guidance, and no matter if the compass is in red or orange, we will be able to have our schools open. So in other words, we will be able to have students in our buildings when the compass is red. So when school starts, whether it be red or be orange, we will be able to have students in our school buildings, but we will have to make sure that we are following, and you'll see in this presentation, many different guidelines to ensure safety and to mitigate risk as much as we can. The reason of switching between models where this might happen is if you do have a case where someone would test positive, we would want to ensure that in our planning that we are planning so it would influence a very small amount of folks or students or staff that it would affect, because the only time we would ever want to shut down our whole school district again is if we were told through an order we had to. In our planning, it looks like the only way we would have to shut down the whole district is if we had an order from our governor or the health department said you have to shut the district down. Right now, in talking with the health department, with our planning, the likelihood of shutting a whole school down even is minimal if we can do our planning and do it as best as we can to mitigate risk. Okay. So today, my objective is to share with you, just so you can get an idea of what's the school environment going to look like, what kind of operations will be, what learning models are we looking at, what will the day-to-day procedural, for students and staff, or students basically look like, and just some communication considerations. So, the building environment. We have currently been putting up plexiglass in our office spaces, so when you enter into a building, there's a plexiglass to help protect our staff. And that's going up. We are putting markers on floors for the 6 feet of distancing. That's where there'll be some new PBIS for students, so they learn to go from, how they're at a birthday party and they go from chair to chair. It'll be like maybe from mark to mark on the floor. And we're working on lots of signage, and signage that is conducive to pictures so people can understand around hand washing, around just what kind of symptoms, if you're feeling this way, this is where you go, and also around the face coverings and what that would look like. Right now, when it comes to the face coverings, we are receiving from the state a cloth face covering for every student, and we currently are determining when is the appropriate time and when is the age appropriateness and in what school environment is a face covering actually needed to mitigate risk of our students and staff. Water fountains, we'll just have the bottle fillers on, and we're looking at how kids can rotate to lockers to make sure we're distancing, and encouraging different types of traffic paths where maybe we time it where only a few different groups of kids are coming in at different times. So we don't have at the middle school 900 kids coming into the building all at the same time, because that would not be a very safe way to enter. So creating a healthy environment, we have increased our cleaning protocols using specific products that are recommended for the virus, increasing our outside air into buildings. We're looking at increasing our sanitation stations, in other words, having more hand washing stations even in our classrooms, so kids can wash their hands multiple times in a day. And also, we will be doing training for all staff on the hygiene practices and also with our students. And if someone was to start to not feel well, we have a place where they can go in the building so that we can isolate them and get them where they need to be without hopefully spreading. Our classroom, our learning environment, right now we're using the 36 square foot per student, in other words, 6 feet around each student desk so that they're spaced. So we're reconfiguring that. I feel bad because some of our teachers are having to remove some of their fun furniture so we can create more space between our students. Looking at where they all have their own supplies, and then a sanitation process where if I use something, I just put it in the bucket and then staff would come by and pick it up and make sure they clean that before someone else would use it. Also, building cohorts of students. So students would stay with the same group of kids. That way, if someone were to contract the COVID virus, it would be isolated to a certain group of students has been recommended. Also, just utilizing larger spaces, and also just places such as the LMCs, or library media centers, that we could deliver materials to the kids instead of them moving down into a new space where multiple students would be using a space of such. Day-to-day operations, we'll be limiting our visitor access to just essential visitors. The large group events will depend on where we are in the compass. Until we're to the yellow, we can't have larger groups of people together, and then green is when we can go back to normal. Assemblies at this point would more or less be held virtually, and field trips will be monitored on a case-by-case basis. And then also, we have points of contact. We have our principal in our building that's a point of contact if we were to have a COVID-19 incident. And then they would work with Jill Mason, who works with our health department closely, and then with staff, Melissa Cates has been working through those cases. And then professional development currently is going to be conducted virtually at the beginning of the school year for all of our staff. And we currently are on hold for travel with PD. And then we'll be communicating quite frequently on our day-to-day operations and what's happening. So, as we get into these different learning models, we wanted to update you that take-home mobile technology devices are currently provided to all students in grades 6 and up. This was through our referendums and our one-to-one that we had done. What we are going to be doing, the district will begin offering take-home technology devices at the one-to-one ratio to additional grade levels in a phased approach. This comes on a needs basis. So take-home technology devices will be provided to all 5th grade students in the fall. So what we're doing is we are gradually phasing it down into other grades with just the need of this blended learning model that could be possible. And devices can be provided at lower grade levels for students in the future. So, when it comes to our pre-K through grade 5, one thing I need to mention is in our elementary schools, we will be running a schedule that is the same as the 2019-20 calendar, which is 5 days a week, full-time school days. We are able to work with our groups of students in their classrooms in smaller groups and distance them, so that's why we are able to do this. And also our 4K programming will run as scheduled, even if we are in the red. I know that's something that our families were wondering about with our elementary level. Now, why we have on here, you could go from a traditional learning model to an online. That is in the case where you find out you might have a case in the building and you might have a small group, or you have someone who went somewhere and they find out that their family member has it and they need to stay home. We want to be able to provide that online learning option so that they don't fall behind in their learning. So basically traditional classroom is the model we are looking at for the elementary, where they can return to the classroom. Staffing will have fulfill responsibilities with increased safety protocols. Includes cleaning small group spaces after students are present, or washing hands more frequently, and wearing of cloth face coverings. Our staff will be wearing the face coverings for sure. Students, we're still working on determining the specifics. For social emotional, also, classroom communities will be established to follow safe social distancing, and free play will continue with supervision. And like I mentioned, we will move between models as needed depending on orders that we could possibly get. There is an alternative. Students and families who are not comfortable with coming back to a full day, 5 days a week model, will be able to attend what's called a Cooley Region Virtual Academy upon a board approval, of course. So the online learning for the pre-K 5, this is to be able to provide as We want to provide as much face-to-face as possible, but technology can be embedded into it for when a student would have to be home and be online learning. Any questions on the elementary? Yeah, Barb?
So I'm assuming from what it said that you'll have teachers communicating with families regularly so they know if there is a device that student can use at home at that time. And then there'll be devices, is that correct? That there'll be devices available for families who do not have one for the child?
Yeah, and we did a lot of that this last spring.
Yeah.
What we're doing is we're trying to slowly roll out one-to-one throughout the district, but it takes time and dollars. We know we can get down through 5th grade, but so say you have a 3rd grade student and they would need a device, we would find them one for the time that they would need that.
Okay, good. Because reality is certain classrooms are going to close, at various intervals.
Yes.
Almost undoubtedly. So, okay.
And also, one thing I want to mention as far as platforms, so Canvas is the platform that our 6th grade through 12th grade will be using, and that will also go down into grades 3 through 5. And then Seesaw is a common platform that will be used in our K2. So that way it will help, if you are home and you have multiple children, it will help because you aren't on Google and then you're on Canvas and then you're on Zoom, just to help keep some consistency. That's correct, right, Kim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Seesaw will go all the way down to 4K.
Oh, 4K, okay.
So what about staffing? Because you talked about the space and obviously, in the lower levels, there aren't as many students in the classroom, but certainly one regular classroom can't do 22 students or 27 students.
Possibly with the spacing in the room, and if there's that 6 feet of distance around, it is possible. So right now, and this is the next plan that will come to you as a board, right now our building administrators are working feverishly on their detailed plan as to how to produce that safe environment around the guidelines that we've been saying would mitigate risk for our students.
And are they involving staff in those discussions?
Yeah, so right now, so we just finally learned this general information and so on, so the majority of them are having meetings virtually, obviously with staff this week to learn more and get input. Because definitely they many times have ideas that we wouldn't think of, that they are in that classroom and with those kids daily. So right now, we're in the process of gathering more input information from them as we try to figure out the final building plans for each of the levels. Because you'll see when we get to 612, it's even more complex, so that input's going to be very important. And then also been reaching out some to families in different manners. We did send a survey to them, just to learn a little bit, but as we're going through the process, there's times where we need to ask more questions and seek more information to continue our plans. So that will be happening throughout this.
And can I just ask, if a family member doesn't want to send one of their children because maybe they have some issues they're concerned, and I know sending the other child to school, but there may be a reason that they want to do that because of the student's educational needs or whatever, are they going to be able to make those decisions per student, or does the family have to do one or all?
So anybody can choose to do the virtual academy. So they could have one student that's going to a virtual academy and one that's attending the school day.
Okay.
Yep, that will be to their discretion. Because what they'll be able to do is enroll in, we call it a program. The virtual academy is a program that they could enroll their child in. Yep, good question.
Chris,
Yes.
if a student is removed because of, let's say, they came into contact or one of their family members had COVID, and they go to online, they're not doing it through the Cooley Region Virtual Academy because it's just for
Correct.
2 weeks per se. Is the teacher responsible then for providing both in-class instruction and online instruction for those students?
Correct. So what it will be is the teachers are getting training on the Canvas or the Seesaw so that they are able to deliver lessons blended or via traditional in the classroom. It's just like if a child is ill and out a week, as a teacher, your responsibility is to prepare those lessons or communicate as best as you can. And so that same instance will happen. But we're trying to get better at that and work with, it's a gradual kind of release with staff too, because we can't expect them to learn everything overnight. But, we can start doing some more lessons or having the camera up so kids can see and be a part of things if they're home, and just quarantining and basically are still they're not ill themselves, just so that they don't lose that connection, I guess you could say. So we're working out the logistical piece of those though, at this point.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So with staff, what if staff, like, let's say the compass goes back to red and there are staff that are not comfortable teaching when they're in red, or working in their work environment when they're in red, what happens with that?
Well, all that's on a case-by-case situation.
Okay.
There's lots of factors that are a part of that. If there's medical conditions involved, or if I'm just not comfortable and so forth. And there's different, I would say, venues and ways to approach that. In that, and we're working on that right now, and we'll be communicating with our staff on the different types of leave and different ways to approach that. One thing I think about is we have our folks that work at Gunderson Health Systems, and now is a time where we're in a pandemic, and some of them probably are like, oh boy, I got to go to work, but it's their job, so they go and they do their best. And some of them might not feel comfortable. So our job is to do the best to make them feel safe while they're here, get them the training, get them the gear they need to do that. But as we know, there still will be some staff in certain categories that we will have to work at, and possibly have them work from home, or figure out what other options we can provide as best as we can.
Can I piggyback one?
Yes.
With our subs shortage, does the state have a plan?
Sorry.
In terms of helping with
Boy, you
that?
guys are rough tonight. Whew.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
We've been waiting.
You bring up a great point, because I'll tell you right now, probably one of the biggest pain points in all this will be staff shortage, sub shortage. So how do we educate our students when you don't have people to do it? So really trying to think of ways moving forward, and our administrative team has been brainstorming a little bit around this, so we might be bringing some things forward to you, just to how do we make sure and ensure that our students have who they need in front of them. Because we know we had sub shortage before this even occurred. So now what? And I know our universities are running into some of these problems with that. Staff are contracting COVID right now. So, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Whew, you ready? Next slide. Okay. So 612 learning options. Right now, they're really studying different types of scheduling options. There is no decision at this point. I'll say that. They're looking at, the traditional learning blended and online, at these different types of scheduling options right now, weighing that out. The traditional learning is where they come in daily and they have increased safety protocols. The students would be scheduled classes and kept with the same cohort of students as feasible. But we'd have to limit our capacity in the commons areas, the hallways, cafeteria, maybe have different timing where kids were in the hallways where we don't release them all at the same time, so they're all in the hallway at the same time and so forth. And just really looking at how can we prepare universal strategies for all of our students, especially those with our individualized plans, to give them the additional supports they need while they're in these cohort models. That's kind of been one of the challenges we've been talking about. And the grading will be, how we had to move to that no pass. We will keep our traditional grading model in no matter what model we go to. So
when you said the students will stay with their cohorts, will the educators stay with them too, or will they continue
Correct.
to do subject?
My understanding at this point, oh boy, I don't know on that, Cheryl. I don't want to answer that and be wrong. So
I would think that would be especially in the middle school and the 5th grade, that's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, at the most, and I know they have the pod model at the middle school, so they're only with 4 core teachers usually in a pod.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike the high school now where they can go between, well, actually with the block schedule, which a lot of schools are wanting to move to now because of this, we already have that. So we aren't in contact with as many teachers, because in the past, it might have been 8 teachers a day or different kids in groups, so. The blended model would be something that is being explored where you have 2 groups of kids, and so the first group comes on, say, Monday, Wednesday, and then the other group comes on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday's a day where students who need more attention or want some more enrichment or intervention, they can come for a third day, which this would limit the amount of students in a building in a single day to help mitigate the risk. And the other reason they're looking at this is the amount of students in your class would be half the amount of students, and it'd be the same amount each day. So this is another model that they're looking at. So you're here one day doing traditional, and then you have a day at home where you're kind of finishing up some work, and then so that way they can check in with the students, and they aren't just off doing online for a week or 2 weeks and then coming back just to keep tabs on things. So that's another model that's being explored.
But would they be doing blended, would they be doing virtual learning on, so if you're the Monday, Wednesday group on Tuesday and Thursday, would there be instruction, or would it just be an opportunity for them to do work?
Instruction also?
Okay. Okay.
One of the days, I think we were talking about Friday, is being more of your intervention, catch-up. Yep.
Okay,
Connect with your counselor, that type of
yeah, okay.
Well, everybody will be engaged, it's just, are you in the classroom?
Or at home.
So this is, so this is the challenge of learning how to use cameras in a classroom. So while you're teaching them at home can see you versus, but then we have to think about supervision of our children at home too and the age levels. So that conversation is happening also. But once again, traditional grading. And then the third part is just the online learning. So if we were to get an order again to shut down, we'd have to go to our online learning. When we say online learning, that means we are fully online at home. Just if we are told we have to do this, that would be the only reason we would do that to those that are electing to come back to our buildings. Now, so here what you see is traditional learning, which we talked about, and the blended learning, but then if there was an order, we'd have to go back to the online learning. And the last option then is our Cooley Region Virtual Academy, which you would choose to go into this as a full-time online option so you don't have to ever go between models. You just want to be fully online, and that's what you would choose to do. And we'll have a presentation with more details on this in our next presentation that we have here. We definitely want to ensure all our students, special education, 504, English as second language, that we have access to education to be reconfigured to meet their needs, even with social distancing. We might need to redesign our schedules to provide access for these IEPs to ensure that they're getting what they need. And schedules will be configured to limit travel between classes as much as possible while still providing these services to the students. So that's where it gets a little tricky. And it may require some additional resources to support the work and system. And this is where, as instructional models change in response to the school or community needs, accommodations will be made for the safe delivery of these plans as best as we can. So when the students come back, we always have our positive behavior and supports, our PBIS, and our social emotional learning. There'll be a lot of new expectations that are going to be shared with students, and they're going to have to be taught. For example, hand washing multiple times a day. Where do I maybe wear a mask, or do I not have to wear a mask? So it's just going to be kind of a new normal. They're just going to learn different expectations. Standing in line. Okay, we're going to stand in line, but we're going to stand at an arm away. Just different expectations that will be shared with them. So they're really working hard, and I give credit to our staff on revising the PBIS plans to teach our students these new expectations and routines. And then also teachers will be provided with resources to support the students' emotional regulation, skill development, and other skills. After being out for so long, we're going to need more supports for our teachers to work with our students on that. And then monitoring our student attendance and engagement and intervene early. If we notice, a student's out for a while and we're not sure why, we need to make sure, and that's nothing new, but just putting it in light here. And really, once again, just changing with instructional models and making sure we're maintaining supports for our students and staff during these times. The mental health supports pretty much the same as the last two slides, except there's a lot more here around having teleservices. So say we are in a virtual environment, we want to ensure that school counselors, school social workers, psychologists, behavior interventionists, and so on are available to support the mental health of our students through a format that could be a teleservice if needed, or even work with other agencies to help them get the mental health therapy they need and services, no matter what setting we are in. So lots of thinking around outreach. And not only for our students, but for our staff, promoting wellness and the Employee Assistance Program. Co-curriculars, this is a big one. I know they had a meeting with the athletic directors today. I haven't heard the report back yet. But right now, they're looking at the WIAA and La Crosse County Health Guidance and looking at, all right, what are we going to be able to do? And I know that our coaches have been asked to start kind of working on what would it look like if we are in the red in your sport, or in the orange, or in the yellow? Like, what kinds of activities could you possibly do or not do? And then also be thinking about, okay, if you are able to compete, where could you compete or not? And some of these decisions will be made by our conference and our MVC conference area as to what's going to be allowed and not in the area. So there's been a lot of communication through bi-weekly meetings that Mark's been having with head coaches throughout the summer, and some emails to families to keep them informed. So this is one where I think we'll get a lot more information in the next week. There was a study that came out from UW-Madison talking about the importance of the mental health and well-being of our students around the activity of these sports. So we're taking that into consideration also. All right, how do kids get lunch? Well, they're currently working on different menus to meet the varying schedule potential. They're evaluating spaces conducive to students eating with distance and with their cohort. They're developing a new grab-and-go salads and sandwiches to speed up service time. So instead of a salad bar, you can do that. Developing ways to deliver a la carte options like salad and fruit bars while maintaining safety. They're developing plans for online learning to provide meals for students. So if you do have it where students are here and then they're away, how do we provide meals to those students still, even if they aren't maybe on site? So kind of brainstorming that. Researching contactless payment options, in considering eliminating online services fees for deposits, and really looking at their standard operation procedures for cleaning and sanitizing. Right now, they're saying if you're in the red or orange, you should really eat lunch in your classrooms, but yet we heard the other day, if you keep your cohort the same and you distance, you could have some kids, when we're thinking maybe some of our kindergartners and first graders eat in the lunchroom still. So just exploring what those options look like right now. And then how do you bus your students? Well, capacity should be limited for physical distancing. So they're looking at how do you implement a seating chart where you're sitting with your family units or with your kids that you're coming from the daycare with, so you aren't intermingling as much. They're actually looking at putting barriers, the plexiglass, behind the drivers. And then, of course, we do the active monitoring of all of our staff. And just a lot more cleaning of the touch points frequently and more frequently, in the seats, and having wipes, and then the sanitizer for students when they're getting on and off the bus. And then we're taking a look at the face coverings also. Like, is that going to be a do we need kids to wear face coverings on the bus because they're in close proximity and the windows are up because they can't be down because it's 20 below zero, so just really looking at all that, but then also really thinking about how many people might drive their children to school now. So do we have to look at how the drop-off pickup zones are and route those in different ways? But then right now, the transportation department is just really encouraging people to contact them if they aren't going to use the bus routes or the buses this upcoming year, so that they can plan accordingly. And so, communication. We'll be sending emails as regularly as we can as we learn more about our plans. We'll update them on our website on the COVID-19 page. We post the color of the compass, and anytime it changes, on our Facebook page on Mondays. And we will, say we have a COVID exposure. Staff and families of students exposed to a case will be notified as quickly as possible. All families of students in a building will be notified of positive cases of COVID-19 in a building. We'll make sure that we keep it personally where we can identify, and keep it confidential when we're doing that. So tonight was the beginning general overview of our reopening plan. We plan to bring our more detailed building plans to you for approval at the next board meeting. And then we will send them off to the county health department for the final review, with us opening our schools on September 1st. So with that, any questions? Other questions?
Any other questions?
I do have a quick question in terms of if we go with the middle school and the high school having those alternate days, with there's cohort A, cohort B, will there still be early releases during this school year?
Brian, to tell you the truth, I do not know. I would assume we would keep our same schedule at this point in time. I don't see there's any reason to change that at this point in time, because instructionally you can count your minutes if it's blended or in the seat. So right now we would keep our same calendar with those early release days, yes. Unless, because we'd have to bring it to the board for approval to change that school calendar. So that's a good enough, does that help answer that? I had to think for a minute on that one. Good question.
Other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Just with the resolution, I don't recall, I skimmed through it, but I don't recall, did it have anything in there in terms of this, asking the state to provide extra funding to get substitutes?
It did for staffing, so that
In general, for
in
staffing,
general,
yeah.
just for staffing. Because what we're finding is that's one of our biggest limitations right now. Because we have large spaces, but then you need certified teachers to instruct. So then you're like, okay, if I had twice as many teachers, that would be easy in some of our spaces. But that's not always the case. So we're still, and that's where we're at in the planning stages at the middle and high school, is how, our goal would be to bring every student back in the fall, but we need to make sure that we're following the guidelines that have been brought forward to mitigate the risk as much as we can. So that's our goal also. Yeah.
Any other questions? I just know that there's a great deal of fear amongst staff, and, the unknown, of course, being if they have anything or they have a family member that has an underlying health issue or concern. And then what does that mean for them financially? Of course, there's that, but there's also the health-wise. And I think Barb kind of asked about that. It seems that that's going to be something important for us to discuss as well, as how will we, because to no fault of their own are in a situation where they may not feel comfortable coming back. It adds to the situation, but yet You know, we always talk about how our staff are our most important resource that we have, and we want to honor them and support them as we have. I think I'm really proud of how we have when March happened and how we supported our staff and continue to support and pay them, but
Right.
and where do we go from here then? And so I suspect by your timeline, that gives us a little bit of time to figure that out. And I know a survey was done of parents as far as what they were thinking about, but have we done that kind of information gathering about our staff to know who might or might not?
Yeah, so actually, Ms. Cates is going to be sending a survey out coming up in this next week to our staff to gauge some of that information. And we actually are going to work on, we were thinking an appendix to the handbook around some of the situations that you are talking about. Because there is information out there through the Family First Coronavirus Response Act that addresses a lot of these things. And we just need to lay it out in an easy to understand format, I think. And it will ease a lot of the anxiety that people are having. So that's
Yeah, and
that's our goal.
I thought
Yeah.
there was some legislation out there that,
Yes,
but
there
not
is.
knowing, trying to keep track of it all.
Oh.
So I think that would be really helpful because
Definitely.
I think there's just that unknown about what does it mean and,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And we'll just say it takes some time to digest
Yeah.
and to read the 100-question-answer document on all these new laws and changes around it. Yeah, definitely. So.
Good. And so the restart plan will be coming to us, more detailed, I think you said more detailed plan, but for approval on the 27th. isn't it?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, then moving on to the Cooley Region Virtual Academy.
Okay, we had mentioned briefly about this Cooley Region Virtual Academy. And before you tonight, I am bringing a resolution for us. What we need to do is resolution for establishment of an online virtual learning program. But it would also, the reason for this is establishing this and entering into an agreement with the school districts of Bangor, La Crosse, Onalaska, and West Salem for this purpose, so that we could create what's called a 660301 that lays out, not only will we create this online virtual academy, but then there is an agreement that lays out all the specific of what our financial obligation is and what is their financial obligation. As far as what we would be doing is entering into what's called the Wisconsin E-Network as an invested member. And it would be, the initial cost for this upcoming year is $2,750 would be our commitment. And then we're looking at, based upon our number of students that enroll, is the proportionate amount of staffing we'd be responsible for in that academy. The only thing that is going to be tricky is right now we are finding our capacity in our classrooms are full. And if you take a student here and there out of all these different classrooms, we might not be able to have a teacher that is free to teach in a virtual setting. That's to be determined based on enrollment. But if we aren't able to provide it, then we would be charged, and that would be another expense for that portion that we would be responsible. So that's kind of how that works. With that, what I'm going to do is invite Kim Edwards up, and she has been working feverishly with the directors of instruction in the area in not only help creating this whole academy instructionally, but the logistics around it, the handbook, the question and answer document, and so on. So I'm going to turn it over to her to share the details of that, and then we'll answer your questions.
Okay. All right, well, good evening. So I'm going to do my best to provide you with some background on Cooley Region Virtual Academy, kind of give you a heads up on where we're headed with all of this, show you some of our preliminary data from the survey that Cheryl had mentioned before, and then do my best to answer any questions that you may have on this. So essentially, we started looking at the Cooley Region Virtual Academy for kind of these 5 big pieces that you see in front of you, one being safety and flexibility. We know that despite all of our hard work and planning to ensure that we are able to bring our students back safely in the buildings, we know that there will be some students who are not able to come back face-to-face, or some families who are just not comfortable with that situation and want to choose an entirely virtual option. The other piece of this is flexibility. We also want to look beyond COVID to life after COVID and know that some of our families really do prefer a virtual experience. So this would provide a very intentional, very systematic, high-quality virtual experience, regardless of the pandemic that happens to be going on. The other great piece about this is it provides us with a substantial level of local control. So as Dr. Mueller mentioned, we would be part of the Wisconsin eSchool network. And so as part of that, we would have two different levels. We'd have local courses and we'd have statewide courses. So with local courses, what's great is that while we would be able to use their online curriculum, their resources and platforms, we would provide our own staff for that. So that would allow us to modify those classes, give them more of a regional feel, and really kind of make it Holmen, La Crosse, and Alaska, our consortium group, give it that kind of a feel. In addition, we'd have access as part of this network to these statewide courses, meaning that if it was a course that we couldn't offer within our consortium with our local teachers, we would be able to send our students out to a class within the network that would be taught by another teacher in Wisconsin. So that kind of leads us next to that high quality, rigorous education. So all of the courses that would be offered are fully aligned to the Wisconsin state standards, and all of the teachers are highly qualified. We know that the teachers that are coming from the School District of Holmen are the best of the best, but we also know that we have that comfort of when we're working within our consortium, we can vouch for the teachers that are working within those collaborative districts, as well as the teachers who if we have to seek out a statewide course connection. And then we also have the diverse course offerings. So there is the potential for, if we have a student who is seeking something unique that we wouldn't necessarily maybe even have within our usual course offering, there would be the potential to do something that's maybe a little unusual. It's a financially responsible move for us because, as we know, it's important for us to keep our School District of Holmen students here in Holmen. And because this is a program, it allows our students to remain part of the School District of Holmen and their resident school and school district. So it also allows us to be that invested partner that Dr. Mueller mentioned. So in addition to that investment, we also get all of the access to the courses and things at a much reduced cost. And while we're not looking at this initially in the first year, we also have the potential to sell open seats to other districts around the state. So we would have the potential to bring that money back. And when we get really evolved at this, as we write more and more curriculum and really, really spruce up our courses, we also have the option of selling those back into the network as well. But as I said, that's not something we're looking at in the first year. The other piece is it's that school pride piece. Because we are still keeping our kids within the School District of Holmen, they have access to all the programs and great things that we have here in Holmen, such as those extracurriculars, co-curriculars. Here you can see our consortium partner districts, as well as kind of the timeline that we have before us, which is frankly pretty aggressive. So as you notice, July 8th, we closed our survey for families just to gather initial interest. I'll go through that data in the next slide pretty quickly. But if you look at the timeline moving forward, you'll see that our hope is to have our staff hired that first week of August, which means a number of things have to happen pretty quickly before we get to that. So while we had initially looked at July 17th as that sharing of the general reopening plans and kind of rolling everything out with CRVA, we're all getting kind of anxious. And so in meeting with the area directors and how the other districts are moving, if you are comfortable with that and we had your blessing on that, we'd really like to open that up even as much as tomorrow, so that when Dr. Mueller shares the general reopening plans, we could also share that online presence we've created for CRVA, which includes a frequently asked questions document that was created based on all of the top survey questions that tended to come from families, so that we have several pages of our frequently asked questions. We have a very drafty draft of a student and family handbook, and then we would have the online enrollment process as well, so that we could have families be able to compare what we are offering in the face-to-face environment and determine if that or CRVA, which one is the better fit for their student and their family, so that they can make that really informed decision before actually having to enroll. Because as you see very quickly, based on that, we are going to have to determine our staffing. And so we will have a 10-day window there where we will post internally to see which of our staff would be interested in being part of that program, which then would be a very quick hiring process. And then we need to get everybody trained up and ready to go for the first day of school on September 1st. Yeah. So here's the results of our preliminary survey. We had just under half of our families respond. And so I can tell you I fielded a lot of phone calls and emails over this. So a lot of our families, we had 101 families who said, yep, as of right now, we would enroll. But then we have this really large pocket, 311 students is what it represents, who said, I need to see what that reopening plan looks like. I need to know the details of that before I make a really, really informed decision. So that's only half of our families and 311. So our numbers could really sway any which way. And so that's, again, part of the reason we're like, the sooner that we can get that open and start working with some real numbers, it would be really beneficial for us. So that was a lot. Any questions that I can answer for you?
I have one. Will this be an option for students who have an IEP in place?
We are actually working very closely with our student services directors, and so we're working out a process for that, but yes.
Okay, and that would be for all the contributing districts, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just curious.
Would this be for the whole year, or could you, at the Christmas break or winter break, switch over back to the in-class setting?
So families would have the option to switch whenever suited them. However, because it is an independent course, we would recommend at least a semester, ideally a year, because switching back into the classroom, you wouldn't necessarily be picking up in the same pace of the content. So you might have some gaps.
So in the high school, that might be conducive, but not necessarily the other levels.
Right, those will be semester-long courses, so that would be less of a challenge.
And so you said unsure at this time, 311, and
Yeah.
did you say half of our families? So how many then didn't? How many students?
We have about 2,000 students that we just don't know.
Okay, so that's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
Cheryl, I have a quick question.
Yes.
In terms of the high school being on block scheduling, so if Onalaska, for example, is the host instructor and their course is a year long, how will that work with our students who are on block? Or vice versa, if
Yep.
it's a lacrosse school student who's being taught by a Holmen teacher who's on block and they're on year.
Yep, and West Salem's actually on trimesters, so it really, that's why this is kind of its own entity, and it will run on the high school, middle school will run essentially on a semester-long by credit load.
So they'll run on their own. They won't necessarily run on Holman's
Right.
schedule or Bangor's or
Yep.
West Salem's schedule.
In fact, they will have their own schedule because, as you know, our 5 districts don't have the same schedule
Right.
either, so,
I see.
yep.
What would a day look like, or is it way too early to say that?
There's a lot of variation. So there is at elementary, we're looking at a fairly consistent day-by-day schedule, which is a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. We want to have our teachers having that personalized connection with our students, but we also know that some of that stuff can take place off the computer screen. So we don't want our primary kids on a computer screen for 5-6 hours a day either. So it's going to be kind of a blended thing there too. At the middle school and high school, there will be that synchronous and asynchronous as well, but it's also able to be a little bit more individually paced so that students can move either more quickly or slower through the content within a window of time. So there's a lot of variation there. Really depends a lot by the level as well, and the course. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
wipe it down for you. Here, you can come on up.
So Julie is coming forward to talk to us about the 10-year capital improvement plan.
Really?
Not really.
I'd like to see this. Go ahead.
So actually, hi, good evening. Getting long for you guys, I know. This item will be rather short, I think. This came to you a month ago with the Fund 46 Capital Improvement Trust presentation and a resolution. And it was supposed to be attached with the consent last board meeting, and it was omitted in error. So it's part of the things that have to be approved to establish that Fund 46. It's pretty small on the screen, so you may have had a chance to blow it up for yourselves when reviewing the materials in the Google Drive. What this is a PDF copy of John Daly, our Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds, running future forecast of capital projects. So it actually starts just to give you an idea of some things that have been done in most recent years, starting with 15-16 school year, and then it goes in excess of 10 years from today. There's some things on there you might question, like, oh, we're going to remodel Viking at $6 million and whatever it says at the very end. No, these are just things that we would, like, that is a big one, and obviously if we don't save for it, it would require a referendum in order to accomplish something like that, but it's been something that's been discussed and with facilities committees and buildings and grounds over the years, that is a need at some point for that building, so some of those things are on here. It doesn't necessarily mean, like I said, that that's going to happen in that year, because we would have to save money or go out for additional dollars to support that. Many of the other things are just annual capital expenses that sometimes can fit within the Fund 10 operational budget for buildings and grounds, and sometimes it just costs too much and it doesn't fit within the annual allocation. So these are the things that we wanted you to be aware of, that he is constantly tracking and sharing with Buildings and Grounds Committee. It's an evolving document and something that will change as new things come up, but trying to identify life expectancy of roofing and HVAC equipment and boilers and all of those things, and putting them on the list for the future. And many, many times they get bumped even further out, and they kind of hobble along with a lot of maintenance until we're able to afford to replace them. So this is the current list provided by John Daly, and you can see his system of identifying it by project and estimated year and funding source and how much in today's dollars he thinks it would cost to take care of those projects. So many of these things, again, cannot be afforded in an annual allocation, because most of his budget, honestly, it goes to just regular operations, and quite a bit goes to gas and electric every year. But it would allow for us to have something approved by the board and begin saving for that capital improvement trust that was presented the last two meetings. So just wanted to bring this back to you and have it approved in consent, because we did omit it in error on the consent last time.
So any questions on this? So my only question is, we're not designating tonight how much is being put into that fund. We're just approving the 10-year plan.
The resolution that was approved last time approved up to $100,000 for the trust.
Right, up to 100,000, but I know I asked the question that we would help to identify what that dollar amount was when it came down to
Okay.
doing that.
So I will share that with you with the budget revision for Q4, because there's a budget built for that.
Okay.
Any other questions on the?
No.
Okay.
And this is on the consent agenda item tonight. So then, the next one is the budget revisions.
So this evening, I present to you the fourth quarter budget revisions for 1920. So these are as of June 30th, 2020, and this is a typical action in July. Not too long ago, I brought you the third quarter as of March 31st. It just got delayed when you actually saw it because of our closure and Zoom meetings, things like that. So this is the fourth quarter, and what you've been provided with is the DPI summary format, as well as the DPI approved notice of change. So I'll show you that on the screen in just a moment because it gives it in a quick summary format of what has changed since the original budget from last October of 2019. So one important thing I wanted to point out is that budget adjustments for fourth quarter do not include changes to reflect any anticipated savings for the COVID public health emergency. The reason for that is that if we change the budget, then we wouldn't have a tool to analyze underspend. So these do not include things like, what did we save in transportation? Let's lower our budget. What did we save in supplies? We don't want to do that because we need to be able to have a comparison to what did we think we were going to spend on those things and what did we actually do after the audit is completed. So we began comparing some of those areas that we know that there were some savings, but the budget itself, the quarter four budget has not been adjusted for those specific areas of savings for the public health emergency. So the revised budget has a planned general surplus of $883,000 as it currently stands. So that's revenue exceeding expenditures by $883,000. Last fall on October 28th, the original budget was $780,000. So it's about $100,000 greater than what was presented last October. The primary reason for that increase in the estimated general fund surplus is because of a decrease in special education expenditures. And therefore, the interfund transfer between the two is lower than anticipated. It looks like it is trending that way, so we do anticipate to spend the special education budget out or even less, which would further impact that transfer that's required between Fund 10 and Fund 27, because Fund 27 cannot be in a deficit. So we've talked about that before, and I will touch base on that too with the notice of change from the original budget. The estimated general fund balance for June 30th of 2020 is, I can't get used to the fogging up glasses, I'm so sorry, back and forth, is $15.3 million. Again, that is last year's fund balance plus any new revenues minus expenditures in the budget, and approximately 31% of general fund expenditures. So as we've talked before, we were in a pretty healthy place going into the closure and the COVID pandemic, and this is really good because there are going to be a lot of unanticipated expenses coming up. Next paragraph talks about general fund revised revenue at $50,049,000, a slight decrease of about $20,000 from last October, and the expenditure totals at $49,165,000. Also a slight decrease, and that has to do primarily with the lower interfund transfer expenditure out of Fund 10 to Fund 27. So I'm the last item on the issue paper that I do discuss the long-term capital improvement trust, and conservatively have budgeted $50,000 in revenue rather than the proposed up to $100,000. Again, that is to get that trust started, which we cannot touch for 5 years as we put money in there. The expenditure out of the general fund is recorded as shared cost in the general fund in the year it's transferred. And then this just helps get that started with being conservative in today's day of uncertainty with aid and federal and state funding. So you were provided with the large 5-page comparison, which gives you the audited fiscal year 18, audited fiscal year 19, the original budget from last October, and the fourth quarter revised in the final column. This is the document that is DPI approved for notice of change, and it's what will go in the newspaper with fourth quarter revisions. And so it gives you a quick glance and summary of what changed from last October's original estimates to the current fourth quarter approved, and where it's changed. So in the top, we start with the general fund, and anticipated revenues decreasing almost 20,000. Here, let me make that a little bit bigger. So that's this number right here. And then we move down to the various categories by two-digit function code in the accounting for the general fund expenditures. And you can see the change from the original to the final quarter four, with the total expenditure appropriations decreasing by $123,000 in the general fund. And this last line item for general fund demonstrates the slight increase in the ending fund balance. Right above there is the restricted and committed estimates. In June, I brought to you estimates for fund balance designation. We talked about restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. So that's identified there for you for the general fund, with an increase of about $153,000 in fund balance. Now, any other underspend that we do, whether it's general underspend in the budget or COVID-related underspend, will increase fund balance. This is the special education changes from October to now, with a decrease in the revenue related to less being transferred from general fund to fund 27. Same change in expenditures, with a expenditure budget going from just about 9.3 million down to 117 million. So you see the change here. Again, the Fund 27 is not allowed to go into deficit position, so the fund balance is 0. Debt service has been updated. When the bonds were, 2009B series bonds were refunded this spring, we applied fund balance to that closing in the amount of $611,000. So this is demonstrating refinancing right here. And that was an increased expenditure that was not planned in October, but when those bonds came callable and the rates were good, we went forward and did that refunding and applied some of the fund balance towards the closing and shortened the term and refinanced to save some money. So that's that change for the debt service fund. The ending fund balance is estimated at 2.7 million, and that's this number right here for June 30th, 2020. And then the last item, capital projects funds. So we currently now have 2 capital projects funds. Fund 42 is our high school addition and remodel construction, so the bonds on the 23.5 million that were approved 2 years ago or so now. And then the addition of the Fund 46 long-term capital trust. So this is showing you, it's combined, but what you're seeing in change here on the revenue side is the 50,000 transfer or shared cost expenditure out of the general fund to Fund 46. And then on the expenditure line item, this has been adjusted based on invoices received to date from Fowler and Hammer and HSR for our construction. And then the balance of that contract and additional FF&E budget for completion of those contracts being basically put into the next budget cycle and taken out of the current, the 1920 budget cycle, so we can get a more accurate ending fund balance for Fund 42. So that same thing has happened with the Viking project. We never quite know when it goes over a fiscal year how much work and invoicing will be done by June 30th and how much will have to be postponed, deferred to the following fiscal year and become the expenditure in that year instead. Any questions?
Questions? So I do. The 50,000 that we're taking from the general fund and putting into the trust, into the capital improvement trust. And part of the value of that was that it would show that we actually spent that money.
Right.
Versus if we don't, then next year's state aid is calculated. How much does that gain us to do the 50,000 in there?
I cannot tell you that without working through the calculation with DPI, the equalization aid calculation on just 50,000, because there's so many components to shared cost.
Yep.
So,
I guess I'm
we
just,
could
my
try to look
concern
at that.
is still about the unknowns, as Dr. Mueller talked about, with going back to school and those additional costs. I just hate to tie money up that we could use to offset PPE or whatever, because it's now sitting in a fund that we can't access, where I think I've been talking about that for the last few meetings, is to try to establish the fund. The idea of doing that is a great idea, but unless it really pays us back a lot of money, I just hate to see us tying that money up. So I'll just
Right.
stop with that. I've expressed that a number of times,
My
but
concern, my greater concern will be the fact that, in most districts, honestly, unless they're transferring even more, is that districts will be underspending so much more than they budgeted for because of closure. Depends if they paid all their staff and what other things they spent money out on. That it could negatively impact their aid because their shared cost will not be what they thought it was going to be in the following year. So I think it's rather minimal.
but for us, that 50,000 could, it's, when we're
could.
looking at staffing and things like that, it could help us, so.
Yeah.
But that's all. I'll just
Yeah.
leave it there. Okay?
Um,
Then the next item is our consent agenda, and we have, let me look at exactly 7 items this evening. Unless you have any of those that you would like to have pulled out and considered separately, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent, my little thing came up. The consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Gary and Brian. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then board member reports and discussion. And if you have any comments, or if you'd like to share them, that would be wonderful. We'll start with Barb.
Just thank you to everybody for, gosh, you guys have been busy. So, yeah, just all the plans moving forward and all the hard work you've put into it and will continue to put into it. And it'll be exciting to have kids and staff back in buildings.
Okay, Brian Wopat.
Listening to all the reports tonight, it's amazing to consider all the unknowns that we are approaching. And I want to say to students and parents out there, as nerve-wracking as it is, to have faith in what we are proving up here and what your administrators are doing in the buildings, that we are charting new territory, no matter how we look at it, and that we are doing the best we can.
Thank you, Brian. And Gary Dunlap.
Nope, I'd just like to say, this too shall pass.
Chris Lau.
Nothing. Nope.
Okay. Rebecca.
I don't have anything.
Okay, and I think I've talked enough, but I just wanted to mention that the first committee meeting of the board's policy on memorials met last week, and we enrolled Tom Thibodeau from Viterbo University to come, and he walked us through and helped with some healing, I feel, and got a lot of good input and comments. We're going to be meeting weekly for the next several weeks and try to come to some solutions and conclusions. And but we are, again, taking all that input into consideration and working through that. And he, of course, as he always does, has a special touch that he was able to help do that in a very positive, I will tell you, it's a really positive group of people there, and diverse, and it's going to be a fun group, I believe, to work with and work through some things between now and the next few weeks. So that's really all that I have. So I would just note that the 25th is high school graduation. The board meeting is on the 27th, and then CISA's annual convention is on August 5th. So with that, I would ask somebody to read the closed session. Does anyone have the agenda they can read the closed session?
I can read it.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby moves to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. In this case, analysis of individual district positions, including contract terms and compensation.
And then is there a second?
Second.
Barb, and Stacy, if you would do the roll call vote, and it would be a yay or a nay.
Barb Wedstein,
Yes.
Brian Wolpat,
Yes.
Gary Dunlap,
Yes?
Cheryl Hancock,
Yes.
Anita Jagozinski is not here, Chris Law,
Yes.
Rebecca Reber.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes. We will be in closed session in just a brief few minutes.